Oh, there we are. Good morning, beloved. Hey, thank you for joining us this morning in Sunday Fellowship. I know you noticed my new hairdo this morning. Uh, in this case, it's going to change. I'm not going back. I'm not going back. It's just a modification of it. Yeah, everybody's been telling me how they thought it looked. I had have my little man bun on it right now, and so it's just something I'm working on for something event next year. So anyway. Thank you guys for joining us. You got the email, I trust, last night. Those of you with us who get the emails, you kind of see what we're going to be talking about. And Catherine is busy this morning, so Brother Curtis is going to do some reading. So I'm excited about this. This, in my mind, is a fun message. Not that the rest of the messages aren't fun. It's just that this is kind of light. I think it's kind of light anyway. I don't know what the Father is going to be saying and doing right now, because I intended this to be a message that's, kind of fun, a little different than what we've been doing, but it still says the same thing. We're still going to talk about sonship in a way. So anyway, with that said, are you ready, my brother? Okay, let's get started.
The Two-Race Man and the Seven Trials of Jesus with David Kenebrew.
Oh, God.
John 1:10 through 11. He was in the world, and the world was made by him, and the world knew him not. He came into his own, and his own received him not. In my days during Bible college, we'd study the life and times of Jesus of Nazareth. During our studies, we reviewed Jesus' trials before his crucifixion, and we closely examined his last days, from the Last Supper to the cross. We found he had 6 trials. We reviewed each trial and who was involved in those events, but there were several things we or I did not see at the time. As I've said many times this past year, everything in the Bible is spiritual and needs to be revealed. Everything God the Father has set before us has 3 things at work at all times throughout history and time. These 3 things are the mystery of sonship, ongoing revelation of sonship, and the process of sonship. All 3 are fixed in God's plan, intent, and purpose. And they are all at work at this very moment, always. So the things we are seeing, hearing, and learning today were hidden from us at that hour. But there were other things which he was revealing. They included Christ living in us. Christ died. We died on our union with Christ, our new knowledge of the Christ life, and Christ being our life. There were several other things the Father was opening our eyes to see and our ears to hear, our minds to know and learn concerning his plan, intent, and purpose of sonship. We didn't call it that or use that term at that time. In Ephesians 2:11, verses 14 and 16. Wherefore remember that ye being in times past Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision, by that which is called the circumcision in the flesh made by hands. For he is our peace, who hath made both one, and hath broken down the middle wall of partition between us. Those are racial barriers of division. That he might reconcile both unto God in one body by the cross, having slain the enmity thereby. 2 Corinthians 5:14 through 16. For the love of Christ constraineth us, because we thus judge, that if one died for all, then were all dead, and that he died for all, that they which live should not henceforth live unto themselves, but unto him which died for them and rose again. Wherefore henceforth know we no man after the flesh. Yea, we have known Christ after the flesh, yet now henceforth know we him no longer, no more.
Thank you, brother. So let's just kind of review some of the things that Brother Curtis was reading. Thank you, brother. That was good. Not as good as Catherine does, but it's good. Not as good as Catherine, but it's good. It's good. It's good. Uh, I had Curtis read all the way down to those verses because I wanted to include the idea of two races of people. On the planet, from creation to the cross, we had two races of people at all times. Now, I won't go into when they came about because everybody kind of that will lead us into a discussion that I'm not ready to enter into. But from Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 3 forward, we have two races of people. But in these verses, it tells you in Ephesians 2, Paul said in verse 14, "For he is our peace, who hath made both." What both? What both is he referring to? Jews and Gentiles. As in verse 11, he said, "Wherefore remember that in times past, that ye were in times past Gentiles in the flesh." So he's identified the believers in Ephesus as what? Being Gentiles in the past, in the flesh, which means that's not who they are now. I wish we had time to go into that, but I'm not looking at that today. But think about what he just said in that verse. Wherefore in times past, that ye were in times past, Curtis, Jenny.
Wherefore remember that ye being in times past Gentiles in the flesh, who are called uncircumcision by that which is called the circumcision in the flesh made by hands.
That's good. So he's saying there was something you were in your flesh that you're not now, and circumcision made by hands. In other words, there was an identity given that was made by hands. Whose hands? Human hands. So, but he said, "For Christ is our peace." I won't go to verse 12 and 13, but he said, "For he is our peace. Christ is our peace, who has made both one." So he is talking about at that time, there was only two races of people, the circumcision and the uncircumcision. Who was that? The Jew and who else? The Gentiles. Now the Jews had 12 tribes and the Gentiles had several nations, but they still were only two races of people. So he said he has made both of those one. One what? He had broken down the middle wall of partition between us, and I put in there racial barrier of division. Right? And he has reconciled, that he might reconcile both who? Jew and Gentile. So up until the cross, we had two races of people, Jews and Gentiles. I wanted to bring that out. Also down in the Curtis read in 2 Corinthians 5:14 and 16, when he said at the cross here, that love of Christ constrained us, that we thus judge that when one died for all die. What does that mean? Both races of people at the cross, what happened? Died. They died. So that made way for what? Another race. And Curtis just told me you're going to talk about that new race next week. So you guys get to hear Curtis's fresh revelation on the new race or species. But the old species, Jews and Gentiles, died at the cross. So when we're dealing with anything from Genesis to Revelation, in Jesus' trials, we're talking about only what? Two races of people. Two races of people. Okay, let's move on. Curtis, will you continue to read the next paragraph? Brother, I previewed this and went in and made some corrections, but I didn't finish it all the way out. So you might run into something that don't make sense to you, and I help you out.
One of the things we saw back then in the Christ Life message, and not in Bible college, that there were two races of people in the world before the cross. But today we will see that out of the cross came a third race, a new race of people who, as the Apostle Paul said, would judge the world and angels at a new trial. 1 Corinthians 6:2-3. Do ye not know that the saints shall judge the world?
That's the first one. The new species, the new race is going to what? Judge the world. What else?
And if the world shall be judged by you, are you unworthy to judge the smallest matters? Know ye not that we shall judge angels?
Number 2. Why you like that, Curtis? You like that?
It's awesome.
It is. And so we get wound up in making decisions on what clothes we're going to wear. And this man said, as a new creation, we're going to have a bit greater responsibility. My. Did that just split your head wide open? So, the new race, well, finish it, Curtis.
How much more things that pertain to this life?
In other words, decisions you make every day is small compared to that which you have responsibility to do later on. So remember that. You're learning to make decisions above where you are today, but yet the decisions you make today prepares you for the responsibility you have tomorrow. You say, but I don't know how me deciding what I'm going to eat for lunch. That is part of what you said, the smaller things pertaining to this life. How's that going to help? Well, I won't go into that, but I will tell you, every decision you make today affects your identity today that will reflect your decision and power tomorrow. Okay, thank you, Curtis. Continue, brother.
But these things came from the trials of Jesus by men. So let's take a look at these trials. As I said earlier, I learned in Bible college that there were 6 trials of Jesus. But were there only 6? As some of you might know, 6 in the number of the Bible is a number of man.
Is that true, Curtis? Curtis likes numbers in the Bible.
Yeah, I like numbers.
He loves numbers in the Bible.
That's right. 6 is the number of man.
Okay.
Why? Because man was created on the 6th day and the last day of creation.
Now think about that. The last thing God created was man. He didn't create anything more at that hour until after the cross.
That's right.
We got number 7. But that I'll leave that for Curtis to discuss with you guys next week. Go ahead, brother.
The Bible says that God rested on the 7th day, making 7 a number of completions. So 7 seems to be important in the plan, intent, and purpose of God. The first 3 trials and judgment came to the Jews.
Okay, let's look at these trials. I guess you guys and remember, this is kind of a light message, and so at least I think it's light. Curtis is reading, so I don't know.
The first trial, John 18:12-13. Then the band and the captain and officers of the Jews took Jesus and bound him and led him away to Annas first, for he was the father-in-law to Caiaphas, which was the high priest that same year. In John 18:19-24, the priest then asked Jesus of his disciples. The high priest then asked Jesus of his disciples and of his doctrine. Jesus answered him, I spoke openly to the world. I ever taught in the synagogue and in the temple, whither the Jews always resort, and in secret have I said nothing. Why askest thou me? Ask them which heard me. What I have said unto them. Behold, they know what I said. And when he had said thus spoken, one of the officers which stood by struck Jesus with the palm of his hand, saying, Answer thou the high priest so. Jesus answered him, If I have spoken evil, bear witness of the evil. But if well, why smittest me thou? Why smote thou me?
Okay.
Man.
So we see this. Now, leave it up, please. Jim, I need you to go back up toward the top, brother.
It's tough.
A little higher in the first verse. There we go. Now, I put this up so you'll understand what happened. They took Jesus from the Garden of Gethsemane, right? They took him from the garden, and they took him, here it says, to Annas, the high priest. It said they took him to Annas first, for he was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, which was the high priest that same year. Now, we're going to get to Caiaphas next. But right now, Annas is not the high priest. But he is the previous high priest before Annas. And it says before Caiaphas, Caiaphas was the high priest that same year. So the year, remember, Jesus had a 3-year ministry, right? Right, guys? Jesus had a 3-year ministry, right, Pete, Monica, Lopez, Jimmy? He had a 3-year ministry. Well, the first 2 years of his ministry, Annas was the high priest. Now, you're going to find later on when he says he goes and he takes him to Caiaphas, Caiaphas was Annas' son-in-law. Now, let me explain some things about that. In that culture at that time, the high priest was the high priest was passed on to the son in that family. You follow? And they had a process for that. But Annas had daughters. He didn't have a son. So Annas' daughter had to marry another Levite to follow in the lineage of the high priest. So it says Annas sent him who was the father-in-law of Caiaphas, which means Caiaphas became the high priest because he was married to Annas' daughter. You got it? Little history in that. Married to his daughter that same year. So the third year when Jesus was taken, Caiaphas was the high priest. But the 2 years prior to that, Annas was. So when they took Jesus, they took him to Annas first because he was the senior man on stage. So they took him to wherever he was. I think they took him to his house. But anyway, it says they took him to him first before they took him to the acting high priest. You know, the one, it's like this. George H. was president, right? George H.W. Bush was the first Bush in president, right? The daddy Bush, right? So what do you call George H.W. Bush? Mr. President. 41. So when his son George W. was elected president, when he was president, what did you call him? Mr. President. So they both carried the name at 2 different times. This is the same thing we got here. Annas was the high priest. Caiaphas was the high priest. But they took him to Annas first because Annas was the high priest when Jesus hit the scene. Jesus had seen Annas was high priest. And Annas had a lot of wrestling with the things that Jesus was doing. But his time was up, so he passed it on to his son-in-law to become high priest at that year. So when they took him to Annas first, and then they took him to Caiaphas after that. Thank you. Let's go to second trial. That's the first trial. First trial was Annas. Annas presented himself Jesus was presented to Annas first so he could talk to him. He could send him through the ringer. I won't go into a lot of what that discussion was, but let's go to the second trial.
Second trial, John 18:24. Now Annas had sent him bound unto Caiaphas the high priest. John 18:14. Now Caiaphas was he which gave counsel to the Jews, that it was expedient that one man should die for the people.
No.
Now I was thinking about what that was saying.
Okay.
That was powerful. Note, high priests were of the tribe of Levi. They were selected by the chief priests and elders and all the council. In Acts 4:6-7, and Annas the high priest and Caiaphas and John and Alexander, and as many as were of the kindred of the high priest, were gathered together at Jerusalem. And when they had set them in the midst, they asked, by what power or by what name have ye done this?
Okay, leave it there for a second, Jim. Now, I put this in there to let you know that the high priest was all brethren. They were all Levites and they were related. That's why I put that, so you'll see the high priest was not a part of any other group. They weren't part of the Sadducees or the Pharisees. They were their own group. They were their own family, because it says here, as many as were the kindred of the high priest had got together at Jerusalem. And so here we have that family of high priests, right? So I wanted you to see how that worked. Just a point of reference to let you know about the high priest, because if you notice, Caiaphas is in that, but he's the son-in-law. But even though he's the son-in-law, he's still a Levite. Got it? Okay, go on, Matthew.
Matthew 26, verse 57, 59-65. And they that had laid hold on Jesus led him away to Caiaphas the high priest.
Now, coming from Annas, correct? So we're going into our second trial.
where the scribes and the elders were assembled. Now the chief priests and elders and all the council sought false witness against Jesus to put him to death, but found none. Yea, though many false witnesses came, yet found they none. At the last came two false witnesses, and said, This fellow said, I am able to destroy the temple of God and to build it in 3 days. And the high priest arose and said unto him, Answerest thou nothing? What is it which these witnesses against thee? But Jesus held his peace. And the high priest answered and said unto him, I adjure thee by the living God, that thou tell us whether thou be the Christ, the Son of God.
Pause. You remember that, Curtis? I adjure thee. I think you and I were talking about that. What did you and I talking about? I adjure thee, when the high priest said, I adjure thee, tell me. I demand that you tell me if you're the Son of God. It wasn't you and I talking about that? Okay. Maybe that was Kurt, Pete and I, somebody, or Jimmy. But anyway, I adjure thee. He's angry. Because just the verse before that, it said Jesus said nothing, right? So he's angry right now. They put him on trial, and they're trying to find something wrong, and everybody they bring it up can't find anything wrong with it. And not that they couldn't find anything wrong with it. They said what he said. And he did say, tear this temple down, and in 3 days I'll build it again, right? But everything is spiritual. They were in the flesh, so they couldn't understand what he meant. Matter of fact, the prophet Jonah said that. The prophet Jonah used that in 3 days. Okay, go ahead, Curtis.
And the high priest answered and said unto him, I adjure thee by the living God, that thou tell us whether thou be the Christ, the Son of God. Jesus said unto him, Thou hast said, Nevertheless I say unto you, hereafter shall ye see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power and coming in the clouds of heaven. Then the high priest rent his clothes.
Pause. He just made a prophecy, right? Of his return to the earth. That, beloved, you hear it in religion, that is not the rapture. That has no, everything we're reading now, pertains to Israel, because Israel has him on trial. The high priest is the leadership of Israel, and so he's saying, you think this is something? Wait. You're going to see something later on. This pertains to Israel. Go ahead. Thank you.
Hereafter shall ye see the Son of Man sitting on the right hand of power and coming in the clouds of heaven. Then the high priest rent his clothes, saying, He hath spoken blasphemy. What further need have we of witnesses? Behold, now we have heard his blasphemy.
Keep going. Trial number 3.
Trial number 3, Matthew 27:1. When the morning is come, all the chief priests and elders of the people took counsel against Jesus to put him to death. In Mark 15:1, and straightway in the morning the chief priest held a consultation with the elders and scribes and the whole council, and bound Jesus and carried him away and delivered him to Pilate.
Okay. The second trial, we see that they were gathered and they questioned him. They brought witnesses in against him. They did all those things that couldn't find anything wrong, except he said that he called him Son of God, and he said, yes, right. Now think about that. When you tell people, I'm the Son of God, look out. They're gonna take you to trial. They're going to say, put him to death. They said, he's blaspheming. Kick him out. We don't have room for him. He's making himself equal. What they're saying is a blaspheme. He made himself what? Equal with God. That's what, and they believed no man is equal to God, because all men are sinners, except them, because they had God's law. The Gentiles were the sinners. They were Jews who had God's law and the prophets to sanctify them with the sacrifices, because Gentiles didn't have that. So that's 3 trials. The first 3 trials are of the Jews. of the Jewish leadership. We got Annas, we got Caiaphas, and on that third one, if you put that back up for a minute, Jim, you see the rest of them. Yeah, the third trial. There is straightway on Mark 15:1. It said, in the next morning, the chief priests held a consultation with the elders and the scribes, and the whole council, all 70 of the Sanhedrin, was in that group, and they made a decision. He's gonna die. So let's we can't kill him. You'll hear that in a minute. We need to take him to Pilate. Okay, trial number 4.
Fourth trial, Matthew 27:2. And when they had bound him and led him away and delivered him to Pontius Pilate the governor. Luke 23:6-7. When Pilate heard of Galilee, he asked whether the man were a Galilean. And as soon as he knew that he belonged into Herod's jurisdiction, he sent him to Herod, who himself also was at Jerusalem at that time.
Okay. The fourth trial, this is the first trial of what? The Gentiles. We got the second race in. First race was the Jews, right? We got race number 2 in. That's important that you understand that. The first race found him guilty. First race said he need to die because he's made himself equal with God. So they bring him to the Gentiles. Now he's in front of a Gentile, which is Pilate. Everybody holds by Pilate. Pilate didn't want to mess with it. Now you're going to read some things later on here that the reason they took him to Pilate because they were at the feast was at hand. And so the Passover was at hand. And so they took him to Pilate. I knew that. And we'll tell you. And Pilate came out to meet them because he knew they couldn't go in the judgment hall. So anyway, Pilate says he didn't want to be messed with. He didn't want to mess with it right now. So what Pilate did, he sent him to Herod. Is that right, Curtis? Is that what you read? Okay, let's go to trial number 5.
The fifth trial, Luke 23:8-10. And when Herod saw Jesus, he was exceedingly glad, for he was desirous to see him of a long season, because he had heard many things of him, and he hoped to have seen some miracles done by him.
Wait a minute, hang on. Just leave it there, Jim. I don't need to pop in. Pilate heard Jesus had some things, so he wanted Jesus to do some magic tricks for him.
That's right.
He wanted to see if he could get a rabbit to pop out of his hat. Herod. Herod wanted to see Jesus do some magic tricks. Hey, can you pull a rabbit out of your hat? I heard a lot about you. Can you do that? You get that moniker? He wanted to see if he could pull a rabbit out of his hat. And what did Jesus do to him? Let's find out what Jesus did.
Verse 9, then he questioned with him in many words, but he answered him nothing. And the chief priests and scribes stood and vehemently accused him. In Luke 23:11-12, and Herod with his men of war set him at naught and mocked him and arrayed him in a gorgeous robe and sent him again to Pilate. And the same day Pilate and Herod were made friends together, for before they were at enmity between themselves.
Now what did Jesus do? Peace. You want to see some magic show? I'm going to show you. I'm not going to say a word, but I'm going to fix this deal between you and Pilate. Isn't that amazing? Didn't say a word. Did not say a word. And it says Herod and Pilate were friends again because they had enmity between them. The King of Peace. Okay, let's see number 6.
Sixth trial. Luke 23:13-17. And Pilate, when he had called together the chief priests and the rulers and the people, said unto them, Ye have brought this man unto me as one that perverteth the people. And behold, I, having examined him before you, have found no fault in this man touching those things whereof ye accuse him. No, nor yet Herod.
Now that tells you this is after Herod. So he's back to Pilate. So he had Pilate, Herod, and back to Pilate. 3 now with the Gentiles. And Pilate is saying, Herod couldn't find anything wrong with him. I don't find anything wrong with him. So what happened?
No, nor yet Herod. For I sent you to him, and lo, nothing worthy of death is done unto him. I will therefore chastise him and release him. For of the necessity he must release one unto them at the feast.
That's the Passover.
Mark 15, 6 through 10. Now at that feast he released unto them one prisoner, whomsoever they desired. And there was one named Barabbas, which lay bound with them that had made insurrection with him, and had committed murder in the insurrection. And the multitude crying aloud began to desire him to do so, as he had ever done unto them. But Pilate answered them, saying, Will ye that I release unto you the King of the Jews? For he knew that the chief priests had delivered him for envy.
Now, I want you to notice what Pilate just said. He said he knew the chief priests delivered them to him for envy. They were in fear. Let's go to the next thing. I think I didn't put it in there. Okay, that was a verse I wanted to put in there, but I'm not going to do it if I didn't put it in there. Go ahead, Chris. The seventh trial, the last. Now, right up until this point, in Bible college, we had stopped because we had heard, I was taught, and we followed this pattern of those 6 trials. But that was a 7th trial that the Father gave me years ago after I was reading. He said they missed it. You see, right now, 6 is the number of men, but God's number is what? 7. For what? Completeness. So he had to be completed. He had to have at least one more trial to be completely ready for the cross. Everyone had to buy in. Right now, you had the leadership of Israel and the leadership of the Gentiles at that time. So what are we missing? Let's read it.
Mark 15, 6 through 15. Now at that feast he released unto them one prisoner, whomsoever they desired. And there was one named Barabbas, which lay bound with them that had made insurrection with him, who had committed murder in the insurrection. And the multitude crying aloud began to desire him to do as he had ever done unto them. But Pilate answered them, saying, Will ye that I release unto you the King of the Jews? For he knew that the chief priests had delivered him for envy. In John 12:19, the Pharisees therefore said among themselves, Perceive ye how we prevail nothing? Behold, the world is gone after him.
That's the verse I put in. You can notice that in John 12:19, when they said the world, they meant the Jewish world, the world they lived in. He said the whole world has gone after this guy. And it made them afraid. They envied that. Pilate, being a Gentile, saw that. Okay, keep going.
But the chief priests moved the people that he should rather release Barabbas unto them. And Pilate answered and said again unto them, What will ye then that I shall do unto him whom ye call the King of the Jews? And they cried out again, Crucify him. Then Pilate said unto them, Why, what evil hath he done? And they cried out the more exceedingly, Crucify him. And so Pilate, willing to content the people.
Who?
The people.
And who did the verse above that? It said, and the priests moved. Who? The people. Scroll it back down just a little bit for us, Jim. A little bit more. That's good.
People.
The people. They cried out. I lost where I was. But I think it might have been above that. But it says the priests moved the people. In 11. Yes, there you go. And the chief priests moved the people. They didn't do it. Who did they incite? And what people is that? The Jews. The Jews. Huh? Right. The Jews moved the priests stirred up the people. And the people cried out, Crucify him. Give us Barabbas. It wasn't the chief priests and the high priest and the scribe. They incited the people. So let's go on down, Jim. Thank you.
Starting with verse 13. And they cried out again, Crucify him. Then Pilate said unto them, Why, what evil hath he done? And they cried out the more exceedingly, "Crucify him!" And so Pilate, willing to content the people, released Barabbas unto them, and delivered Jesus, when he had scourged him, to be crucified. Luke 23:21 through 25. But they cried, saying, "Crucify him! Crucify him!" And he said unto them the third time.
That means that Pilate asked how many times?
3.
That's significant, 3 times.
And he said unto them the third time, "Why? What evil hath he done? I have found no cause of death in him. I will therefore chastise him and let him go." And they were instant with loud voices, requiring he might be crucified. And the voices of them and of the chief priests prevailed. And Pilate gave sentence that it should be as they required. And he released unto them him that for sedition and murder was cast into prison, whom they had desired. But he delivered Jesus to their will.
Whose will? The people. The seventh trial that completed his death was from the people of Israel. Keep going.
In John 12:17 through 18. The people therefore that was with him when he called Lazarus out of his grave and raised him from the dead bear record. For this cause the people also met him, for that they heard that he had done this miracle.
Now think about this, hold on, Jim. Think about that. The same people that saw the miracle, the same people that witnessed Lazarus being raised from the dead, was the same people raising up voices against him. Same people. That's what that said. Didn't that say that? For this cause, people also met him. For they heard that he had done this miracle. So it didn't matter what he had done. There's a reason for that. But they stood in judgment at the seventh trial and said, "Crucify," along with the leadership. So let's go on, babe. Jim. Curtis.
This last trial was echoed many times by the apostles. In Acts 2:36, therefore let all the house of Israel know assuredly that God hath made that same Jesus, whom ye have crucified, both Lord and Christ.
Who? He said what? Who did he say did that? The house of Israel know surely that God had made him this same Jesus, whom ye have crucified. Go ahead.
Acts 3:13. The God of Abraham and of Isaac and of Jacob, the God of our fathers, hath glorified his Son Jesus, whom you have delivered up, and denied him in the presence of Pilate, when he was determined to let him go.
Woo! They slapped him with that one. Pilate wanted to let him go. Pilate wanted to let him go, but y'all said, "Oh no, we ain't having none of that King of the Jews stuff." Yeah, you're right. He washed his hands and said, "I don't find anything wrong with you. You want him to die? Okay." Now I was going to I'll wait till I walk on the pier with that. Pilate washed his hands, and right now the apostles are before the same Sanhedrin, and they're saying to him, Pilate wanted to let him go, but you didn't. You wanted him crucified. Keep going. Acts 4:10.
Be it known unto you all, and to all the people of Israel, that by the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, whom ye crucified, whom God raised from the dead, even by him doth this man stand here before you whole. Acts 5:30. The God of our fathers raised up Jesus, whom ye slew and hanged on a tree. There were the 7 trials of Jesus. These were the 7 trials of Jesus, and the 2 races which took part in them. As our intro verse says, John 1:10 through 11, he was in the world, and the world was made by him, and the world knew him not. He came into his own, and his own received him not. But we also need to remember and keep in mind that these things, the trials of Jesus, were all part of the plan, intent, and purpose of God the Father. In 1 Corinthians 2, 7 through 8, but we speak the wisdom of God in a mystery, even the hidden wisdom, which God ordained before the world unto our glory, which none of the princes of this world knew, for had they known, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. Ephesians 3, 4 through 5, whereby when ye read, ye may understand my knowledge in the mystery of Christ, which in other ages was not made known unto the sons of men, as it is now, revealed unto his holy apostles and prophets by the Spirit.
That's what I wanted to put that in verse 5, which in other ages was not made known unto the sons of men. That's your 7 trials of Jesus. The Jews and the Gentiles had no knowledge of this mystery. That's why they crucified him. Keep going, please. Okay. Good.
It'd be done.
So, so those were the 7 trials of Jesus. I thank our brother Curtis for reading for us.
Shaky.
Just wanted you to see, just like I said, it was a complete thought, which I'll maybe talk about some other time. But just to let you see that the 2 races of people that was on the planet participated in the death of Jesus, because as Curtis read in 2 Corinthians 5, 14 and 15, whereby the love of Christ constrains us that we does judge that when one died for all died. Both Jews and Gentiles were at the trials of Jesus and represented the whole world. They represented the world makeup at that hour. So, with that said, I won't keep you guys. Brother Curtis will be with you next week. I want to thank you for joining us this week in Sunday Fellowship. If you got any questions, please let us know. And trust the Father that you guys have a great Thanksgiving, and that you don't, those of you in America having Thanksgiving, if you're somewhere else in the world, you can eat Thursday if you want, but the people in America are going to celebrate Thanksgiving. And try not to eat too much, guys, okay? Don't overdo it, okay? All right. Thank you, guys. God bless you. Also, we'd like to have you guys, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please subscribe to the channel, and when the messages go out, you'll be able to get the message for that day dropped in your mailbox. So please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You get to hear Brother Curtis for free.